Okay, welcome back to Fun with Math, and here I'm going to look at everything you need to know to start out with decimals. The first thing that you have to realize with decimals is that decimals are actually place values. So I've got this little road map that's kind of like what I like to call it, and here in the middle is my decimal point. So each part of a letter has a different term. So when we're talking about your decimals, this purple section here, these are your whole numbers. So these are the whole numbers that we're looking at. Okay? So we have ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. This green section down to this side, well, these would be the decimals or the parts. So this is like the parts, the fraction, the decimal. Okay, so it is the portion. Notice all of these down in this green area have this THS, so this part right here, this THS, that is after it. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, etc. On the whole number side, notice it just simply ends here in S. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, etc. So that is really important to keep in mind, because sometimes what you're going to be asked to do is you are going to be asked to have to write out your decimal in words. And the only reason we do that is because we just have to make sure that we have a firm understanding of what the number actually is that we're looking at. So in order to write decimals in words, the first thing you need to do is you need to write the number in front of the decimal point. So you would write it out, much the same as you would write it out if you were writing a check. The decimal point is represented by the word and. Okay, so again, much the same as when you're writing a check, that first you write out the whole dollar amount, and then you write "and" to signify now you're writing the cents part. The difference between writing a check and what we're going to do here is that we don't put the decimal part in numbers, we also write them out in words. And we have to remember that you need to attach that THS piece to the word of the decimal piece. Okay. So here I have, let's look at writing the word for each of these decimals. So the first one I have here is 72.68. So to write it out in words, the first thing we need to do is we need to write the whole number out as a word. So this is 72, so we would write 72. We then have a decimal point, so we would then use the word "and." And then we have to look at what actually is this number. Well, this is 68. So the first thing we do is write the number. So we would write 68. But then we need to write where it falls. So I have two places. So if you look up here at your road map, my first place is tens, my second place is hundredths. This is my second place, so therefore this would be 68 hundredths. And remember the THS on the end. Okay. So let's look at the next one. We have 0.0496. So first we have to write the whole number. So this is 0. The decimal point, so then we would write "and." And then we have to write this number that you see. So this number that we see is actually 496. So that's what you would write. So this is 496. But then we need to look at how many places. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 places. So if you go back to your road map, notice we have 1, 2, 3, 4 places. So 4 places is at 10 thousandths. So down here we have 496 10 thousandths. And notice the THS on the end. Last, we have a big number here. We have 1012.4705. So the first thing that we have to write is we need to write our whole number. So we're going to write this whole number here, which is 1012. So 1012. We then write the decimal point. So this would be and then we need to write this back number. So this number is actually 4,705. So we would write that. So this is then 4,700 5, and then we have to look at again 1, 2, 3, 4 places. So again, using your road map, 1, 2, 3, 4 places gives us 10 thousandths. So here we would then have to write 10 thousandths. Sorry, I misspelled that here. And again with the THS. Okay, so all of those are taking your decimal and rewriting them as, say, an English sentence, or basically rewriting them into words. Okay. Now, obviously, if we can go from the decimal into words, we should be able to go from the words into decimals. So there's a couple key things here that you need to pay attention to. First is, we need to pay attention to where the and is located, because the and means the decimal point. Once you hit that and, it means the last piece is actually your decimal. Okay? So here we have 17 and. So notice that's where the and is. So this right here is going to signify your decimal point. So we have 17. So that is 17. We then have a decimal point. And then we have 9 hundredths. So we have to look at your little road map. And we're looking at where is the hundredths. Well, hundredths is right here, and it is 1, 2 places away. Therefore, when we're writing 9 hundredths, we got to put it in the spot that it's supposed to be in. So that means 0, 9. Okay? So we have whole number, decimal point, and then the decimal itself. Let's look at another one. So here, again, I have an and. So what's in front of that is it says 6 and 28 thousandths. So this is going to be 6 and, so decimal point, and then we have thousandths. So again, if you look at your road map here, thousandths is here in the 3rd spot. So if I want 28 thousandths, it means the 8 has to go in this 3rd spot. So if you think about it, you would have 2, 8, but then we also need to have the tenths represented. So this ends up being 0, 2, 8. Okay. So now we have 7,165 ten thousandths. So notice, nowhere in this sentence is there actually an and. Well, that's because we have started this off by saying 0 point. If you don't see an and, it means you don't have a whole number. So here we have 7,165 ten-thousandths. So when we're doing that, notice my ten-thousandths is here in the 4th spot. So I have 7165. So in this case I don't have any zeros, so I just write it down, 7165, and thus we have the decimal. So this little roadmap here in the beginning, especially as you're starting out, is one of the most important things to use, because it is going to help you with your place value and placeholders. Now the other thing that we can do is we can do what's called writing fractions as decimals. So what we have to look at is that the denominator is going to give you the place value of the decimal digit in the number. The number of zeros is the number of places behind the decimal. The numerator tells you the numbers to fill in. So what we have to remember here is that unless we have a mixed number, these are all just straight decimals. So if we look at the first, we have 92 hundredths. So we know that we're going to start with 0 point, and then the number in the bottom, so this tells you the value of the decimal digit. Okay, so this right here is telling you that you are in the hundredths. The number of zeros, okay, tells you the number of places behind the decimal. So here we have 2 zeros, so 2 zeros equals 2 places. So this is going to be 0.92. So if we look at that roadmap again, notice my hundredths is the 2nd spot behind the decimal. So we had 92, so we would fill in 92. Okay. So now let's look at this next one. So here I have 100,000. Okay. So this right here is going to tell me that we were at 100 thousandths. So THS. And then the number of zeros essentially tells you how many places. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. So the other thing that this tells us is that we have 5 places behind the decimal. The top number tells us what the top is, so this is 19. So again, let's take a look at our little map here. So we are looking for 100 thousandths, so that is way down over here. I only have the number 19. So this would be a 9, this would be the 1, which means I have 3 more zeros to put in. All places must be filled, so therefore this is 0 point, and then I had 3 zeros and then 1 9. I needed 5 places filled, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I needed to make sure that my 9 fell in the right spot, and it does. Okay. Now, if we look at this one, notice this one is improper. So the first thing that I would look at is the fact that this is an improper fraction. So to do that, you could do a couple things. First, you can change this over to a mixed number by very simply dividing that you have 889, 100 goes out on the outside. You divide 100 in and it comes out with 8. And then we know if you subtract away that 800, it leaves you with 89. So here, what this tells us is that this is a whole number. That means this is going to start out as being 8 point. Now again, the bottom here tells us where we're supposed to be. So this is telling us that we are in the hundredths. And the number of zeros tells us the place number, so it's 1, 2 places. So I have 89 is left over, so this right here is my decimal. So therefore this is 8.89. Now the last thing that I have is I actually have a mixed number here. So again, when we look at it, this front part, this right here, is going to be my whole number. And notice it's just in the 1 spot. And then again, when we look at this bottom, this tells us that we are the thousandths. And then we have 3 zeros, so this means that we have 3 places. So here, this is going to start out as being 4 dot, and then I have this 67. So again, if you reference back to your roadmap, thousandths is 1, 2, 3 right here. 67 is the number I have. So we start with the 7, so we've got 7 goes here, 6 goes here, which means I need to fill in with a 0. So this becomes 0, 6, 7. I have 3 places after the decimal point. My 67 ends in the last place, and I have my whole number. Okay. Okay. Another major thing that we like to do with decimals is we can do what's called comparing decimals. So when we're comparing decimals, what we're actually looking for is we are looking for the decimal that is either the largest or the smallest, depending on what your question asks. The easiest way to compare them is to line them up vertically and then compare the actual columns themselves. Okay, so we have 0.905 and we have 0.91. So here we have to compare column by column. So if we look at this first column here, here is my decimals. Okay. So then we look at this first column. So the first column is our 9s, and notice here with these 2 9s, they are both the same. Because they're both the same, we have to move on to the next. So then we would look at this next column right here. And what you need to notice is that these 2 numbers are different. Okay? Now, with this, 1 is bigger than 0. So since 1 is bigger than 0, we now have the larger decimal. Since 1 is bigger than 0, this means that the larger is 0.91. Okay. So let's look at it again. I have 7.067 and 7.054. So again, we have to look. My ones columns are the same. Here's my decimal. My next column are both 0. So then again, we just happen to come to this second column here. And notice in this column, what do we see? Well, 6 is larger than 5. Therefore, this means the larger decimal is 7.067. Now, the only reason we looked at larger here is because the question asked for larger. The other way that you could see this question is you could be asked for the smallest. If that was the case, then when you're comparing your decimals, you would be looking for the smaller value, and that would give you the smaller decimal overall. Now, another thing that we do is we arrange our decimals, and in this case we want to go in order from smallest to greatest. And then we want to graph them on a number line. So, first thing we have to do is we have to arrange our decimals and figure out what the order is. Again, I would list them out vertically. So I have 1.432, 1.54, 1.14, and 1.5422. So the first thing that we need to look at is we have to be able to go from smallest to largest. So we need to know which one is the smallest decimal. So they all have the same whole number. So we have to start looking at the first column. And so if we look at the first column, we have a 4, 5, 1, and 5. Of all of these, 1 is the absolute smallest. So when we order from smallest up to largest, we have to start with 1.14. So this one would be gone, so I would just cross it off my list because I already used it. Now I need to look at the next one. So I'm going to stay in this first column until I have to move. So here again I have a 4, a 5, and a 5. Well, 4 is less than 5, therefore my next decimal is going to be 1.432. So I can get rid of that one. To figure out what's next on the list, I still stay here, but notice my 5s are the same. So now I'm going to move over to the next column. So here I have a 4 and a 4. Well, those are the same, so that means I have to move on to the next column. What's not stated here is that this actually has a 0. And so I have 0 and I have 2. Therefore, 0 is less than 2, which means 1.54 is my next smallest. Since I've now gotten rid of all 3, the last one is 1.5422. Okay. So we have ordered them from smallest to largest. Creating a number graph or a number line just simply means you're going to draw a straight line, put arrows on either side, and we're going to go ahead and kind of drop stuff in. So here I would drop in a 0, and then if looking at it, there's a few different ways that you could do it. We could go up, so 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, etc., all the way up, 0.5, 0.6. And if we had started here, say at 1 instead of 0, and so this is our large tick mark, and then, you know, way over there would be the other, we have 1.14. So you just kind of guesstimate. 1.14 is going to fall, you know, roughly right there. And so this would be 1.14. Then we have 1.432, so maybe that falls about there as 1.432. Then we have 1.54, so we're talking about maybe right here, and then literally right next to it is the other, so this is 1.54 and 1.5422. So when you're making a number line, I mean, you're really just kind of guesstimating where it is. You're just showing a visual of what's going on. Okay. Now again, there's many different ways that you can set it up. This is just one such method to do that. Now the last thing that we have is we have what's called rounding decimals. So rounding decimals it's kind of an odd thing to think about. We're going to look at the digit to the right of the indicated value. If it's 5 or higher, then you're going to increase the desired digit by one value. If it's 4 or less, you're going to leave the desired digit alone, meaning it doesn't change. Okay? If you round up to a whole number, you're going to fill in the zeros up to the decimal point. If you're rounding a decimal number, do not fill in zeros after the decimal point. Okay, so all of that is a lot of confusing stuff, so let's just go ahead and take a look at it. So I'm giving you a decimal and I'm telling you how to round. Here we want to round to the nearest tenth. So the first thing you want to do is you want to take your decimal, so 0.5395, and you want to identify where you want to round to. I want to round to the tenth. So, again, you can reference your little road map. And when we're doing that, notice the tenth is the very first spot next to the decimal. Okay? So we want to round to the nearest tenth. So that is this spot here. In order to do that, we have to look at the spot directly to the right. So we're going to look just strictly at this 3. We're going to ask ourselves, is this greater than 5? Now, the 9-5 piece we don't care about. It's not there anymore. It doesn't exist. We are just simply looking at 3. And we ask, is the 3 greater than 5? 5 or higher? And the answer is no. 3 is less than 5. Therefore, this is going to essentially be left alone. And since we want it to the 10th, our answer becomes 0.5. Now, because this is a decimal, you do not fill in any other zeros. Even though this original decimal had 4 places, we are rounding it down to 1 place. Okay? So this is what we're looking for. So let's look at it again. We have 207 and 9976. And we want nearest hundredth. Okay. So here, nearest hundredth, well, we need to remember where the hundredths is. So again, if you need to reference your road map, notice hundredths is the second place right here. So when we're looking at our decimal, that means we're looking at this place right here. And in this case, we then are going to look at the spot directly next to it. Okay, so we're going to look at this spot. So here we ask, is this greater than 5 or not? Well, 7's greater than 5, which means we round up. So we're going to round up the 9. Well, when you round up 9, it becomes a 10. So that would mean this becomes a 0, and we round up the next one. Because this is also a 9, it also becomes 0, and we have to round up the next one. So this becomes 208, but then because we wanted the hundredths, we have 0, 0 off the end. And this is what we're looking for. Alright, so now for the rest of these, I'm giving you one decimal and we're looking at different ways to be able to round it. So I have 809.5732. I want to round to the nearest hundred. So notice there's no TH on the end. So if I look at my map here, 100 is this third spot. So in order to round to the third spot, what that means is that I am looking at this place right here, the 100. So the rule is going to be the same. It still says you look at the spot directly to the right of it. So this is a 0. Well, 0 is clearly less than 5, which means this whole number becomes 800. Now remember the rule that says if rounding a whole number, fill in the zeros up to the decimal point. So because we wanted the 100, that's why we put these 2 zeros back in. Okay. We have the same decimal, 809.5732. And in this case, I want the 10th. So remember, the 10th is this spot here. So we are going to look at the spot directly next to it. Since 7 is greater than 5, this is going to become 809.6. So again, we have 809.5732. And here we want to know the 1. So we're looking at this number here. We have to use the number directly to the right in order to do that. Since this is a 5, it means we round up. So 9 is going to round to 10, making this 810. Last, we have 809.5732. Here I want the thousandths. So remember, thousandth is going to be 10 hundred thousandths. So we're looking at this one. And we're going to look at the spot directly to the right of it. Since 2 is less than 5, nothing changes, and this becomes 809.573. Okay. So that is essentially everything that you would need to know about your introduction into decimals and how decimals work. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, math is bananas. So keep smiling, have lots of fun, be sure to relax, and as always, I'll see you next time.